Welcome to this edition of the 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Got a special guest. He's a repeat visitor to the show. He is one of my best friends in the world and also in journalism. His name is Trey Wallace. He's a senior SEC writer at Outkick.com. Trey, thanks for joining us amidst what's a crazy time for you, crazy time in the league. But I can't wait to talk to you today because we got lots of burning topics. But first of all, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Man, come on, Chris. I'd have done this thing at midnight if you would have called, man.
That's probably true.
That's what buddies are for. No, it's good to be on, man. Glad to see big things happening in Southeastern 14, and it's just awesome. So we're all busy right now. It's SEC football season and a lot of craziness going on.
Well, let's start in your backyard. Of course, a lot of people know that you used to cover the Tennessee beat. You were based in Knoxville, and there's a big showdown in your backyard this week with Lane Kiffin's homecoming to Ole Miss, which I think is going to be met with mixed emotions. Tennessee's playing good ball. Ole Miss comes off a huge win. What's the mood in Knoxville for this one?
Man, excited, Chris, I think is the big thing here. You've got a team that is 4-2, and let me say this too. I think 30% of it is Kiffin coming back to Knoxville, bringing an Ole Miss team back. But I also think I think a majority of this is Tennessee fans are excited to see the product that is on the field, what they've done over the last 2 weeks against Missouri and South Carolina, which, look, Missouri's defense was bad. South Carolina's was a little better. But it's the way that they're putting up points. It's their offensive output. It's the way that they're playing on defense that you're getting a lot more out of this group than I think a lot of people expected before the season started. So, look, you don't have these opportunities a lot when you get a top 15 team to come home and play. Tennessee has sold out the game. They're going to do the whole checkered kneeling type thing. It's another thing for fans to get excited about. And the mood is shifted around here. Look, I wrote a piece yesterday. It's like, you don't have to buy into the program yet. Like, I know that you're still waiting on results, and 6 games into the season is not going to bring you that. But you can get excited about the opportunity to play a team, the caliber Ole Miss, top 13, number 13 team in the country, and get to play them at home. And have that night game atmosphere. And I think that's what Tennessee fans, have now looked forward to coming up on Saturday. I mean, things started rolling on Monday, about how excited fans were, and we were 5 days away from a game. So, look, the way the offense is playing now, I think it puts butts in seats. I think that's recognizable all around the conference. The same could have been said for Ole Miss, in the first year under Kiffin. So you're starting to see that now with Josh Heupel in Tennessee, and I have to give him credit for changing things up at quarterback and going through, Chris.
Well, people may look at Tennessee's season and criticize it a little bit and say, well, they haven't beaten anybody yet. And yes, that's true. And the schedule is going to get a lot tougher, too. That's also true, and I think that will tell us really where Tennessee stands. But all you can control is what's in front of you. And frankly, and I guess you could argue the Florida game a little bit because the score got a little lopsided. It was 20-something points, but I watched that game, and what I saw of it, I thought Tennessee played better than the score indicated. To me, when I've watched them play, which has been, I've probably seen half the snaps the Vols have taken, I think they've played pretty well so far. Some people may take issue with the Pitt loss and how they got picked apart. I know Pitt hasn't played a tough schedule either, but that team's been putting up offensive numbers. I guess, long way to say, to me, I think Tennessee has played pretty well, and I think it would be hard to expect more than they've gotten in their first year under Josh Heupel.
No, and I agree with you, and I think it's also, Chris, too, and look, we can't go back and change history, but, if Hendon Hooker, if they'd have gone with Hendon Hooker, let's say, against Pittsburgh, I think you would have seen the Tennessee team beat Pitt, just because you witnessed the number of overthrown balls in that game. The coordination with the receivers was off with Joe Milton at quarterback, and he just wasn't ready for that game. And look, I give credit to Josh Heupel for saying, okay, we've got to switch this thing up now We underestimated Hendon because we didn't get to see him in fall camp, taking hits, live game action, whatnot. They didn't realize what they had. They had a guy that can get outside the pocket, can make plays with his feet, throw the ball down the field, nice pass, and can run this offense. I think that you saw, the first one or two games where he was starting, it took a minute for him to get the tempo down. But I think he's got that going now, and credit to Josh Heupel for making that decision, because I think it switched up Tennessee's season. I don't think they would have gone to Missouri and won by so much with Joe Milton, the quarterback, and I don't think they would have done the same thing against South Carolina in the way that they did it. But it comes down to what you can do on the field, and I think Hendon Hooker has proven to be a pretty darn good quarterback in the Southeastern Conference through 4-2 on the season so far.
I know that hire was met with skepticism and yawns, and maybe they had other choices they didn't get. I know that fan base has got a thing for John Gruden that was never going to happen. But look, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's where the bar is that everybody is judged against. And if your bar is Gruden or whoever it is, maybe other guys don't look as good. But I always thought that was a really solid hire. You looked at the track record, what he'd done as Missouri's OC, and I really never understood all the skepticism for that hire. Can you explain that to me? Because I thought that was a solid hire from Tennessee, and I think it's bearing out that way now, too.
I think it was because it wasn't the sexy name, that were out there. Let's be honest, but Tennessee was in a spot where they shouldn't have. I don't know if they should have expected a sexy name higher, like a James Franklin. Let's just say Tennessee was under a cloud of investigation. Tennessee was going to potentially get hit with scholarships. The program was in bad shape. And look, it's the perfect example was if you remember Steve Strickland having to hire Dan Mullen away from Mississippi State. He didn't want to hire Dan Mullen because he didn't want to screw up the place that he had come from and take their head coach along with being the athletic director. I think they're in the same situation with what happened with Danny White. Danny White didn't want to go take everybody he could from UCF, but it was his choice. It was his plan. Look, once I had 3 or 4 guys say no, okay, who can I go to that's going to be my something in the bag that I know he's going to take the job, and I know that what he can do at a school and be a good head coach per se. And that's why they went with Josh Heupel. And, offensively, Tennessee needed an offensive coach. The defensive stuff, that ain't working. They needed somebody with personality. That's what, Josh Heupel likes to bring. And it's a lot better than what Tennessee was sitting at with the coach they were at, previously.
Well, and one more thing, he is an offensive coach, and they are putting up some points, but the defense, sometimes when an offensive coach comes in, and you can look at Mike Leach in some places, although that's changed. Now he's got a defense there, and maybe that's not the best current analogy, but my point is sometimes you hire a hotshot offensive mind, and you're winning games 49-48. You see that in Ole Miss right now a little bit too. But my point is, I think that the defense has been pretty good under him. They've been pretty good against the run, and that's another thing that's impressed me is their defense, I think, has played pretty well under the circumstances, and especially given all the people they lost to the portal.
No, I agree. The defense is working with a group that doesn't have a lot of depth. I think they're good in the secondary, but right now Tennessee is literally rolling with about 3 linebackers that are able to play. And know this defense. Aaron Willis, a freshman, he's not going to know it straight off the bat. But they're working with Jeremy Banks, former walk-on Solon Page, and Aaron Beasley. Those are 3 linebackers. But I give a lot of credit to Rodney Garner and what he's done, with the defensive line. He's took a group of guys that I don't want to say were average, but a group of guys that were just middle of the road SEC players, and he turned them in to a good defensive line that's put pressure on the quarterbacks. I think that, the last thing I kind of say about that part is, you look around the country, you look at Ole Miss and they won 52-51, but they gave up 51 points. What you're seeing out of Tennessee and how they're winning their games is they're not giving up a lot of points at all. So, and I mean that, in the SEC games, the Florida game got kind of out of control when they went on a 21-0 run in the second half. Um, but they're starting to slowly progress. And I think ever since that Pitt game, they've gotten better and better and better. So you have to give tip of the cap to the defensive side as well for bringing it along with the offense.
Trey, let's talk LSU for a minute. It really, the wheels are coming off in Baton Rouge. We talked to Matt Moscona about it this week. He had his own insight on that. What's yours?
That Florida game, very pivotal for LSU's head coach Ed Orgeron and his future. I think you've already got people, Chris, on the outside looking around, seeing what they can do, and talking with a few folks. The boosters have been calling around, maybe is the best way to put it, to kind of see what money would need to be raised. How, if they were to pay for a buyout, what would that be? It just hasn't gone well. And everybody brings up the Gene Chizik thing, and we can make that comparison, but it felt like LSU, and you hate to use this, man, but it felt like that team kind of just gave up against Kentucky. The fact that they were down 31-7 at one point, were not playing good football, couldn't rush the ball. The defense was playing bad. The linebackers are off their set. You just look at this team as a whole right now, and it just looks unorganized. And I know they're dealing with a bunch of injuries in the secondary, and I completely understand that, and the wide receiver spot and all that good stuff. But you look at a talented team like LSU, and for them to play the way that they have against Auburn in that second half and play against Kentucky where you just don't look alive at all, the writing is starting to be seen on the wall when it comes to Ed Orgeron at LSU. And I just don't expect them to beat Florida this weekend, especially 11 o'clock kickoff in Baton Rouge. I mean, people are going to have to start saucing up at 4 a.m. to get ready for that game.
Well, look, I don't think they were going to beat Florida with Keyshawn Boutte or Derek Stingley Jr. or Ali Gay or some of the guys that are out. And I don't think they're going to win it now, certainly. So if this hinges on Florida, I think he's in a heap of trouble. Let's say they make a change. Who do you think they might go after? Who do you think is realistic for LSU to get?
Yeah, I think I think they would have a fight with USC over James Franklin if they wanted to go down that road. I really do. You can't here's the thing about LSU. The next head coach who comes in at LSU, he's going to be able to win immediately because of the talent that's already there. He's going to be able to recruit. The state of Louisiana recruits itself. That's what LSU does. You go find a quarterback and you're good to go. I think you already got a quarterback right now with Max Johnson. So I don't think that it's some huge rebuild like you see at other schools. So Lane Kiffin's name is going to get thrown around at the LSU job. It just is. Would they be interested? Maybe for a little bit, but I don't see Lane Kiffin going to LSU. So I would look at the James Franklin type of coaches, and maybe you could steal one away. But LSU is one of the top 5 jobs in the country. We know this, and I think they have the ability to go out there and spend a lot of money on hiring somebody else. Like I don't think Jimbo is going to leave Texas A&M. Okay, he's set himself up nicely with that buyout. That's absolutely zero, pretty much. But I don't think that would happen. But I do think that they'd kick around some big name guys before they decided to look at like a Billy Napier or something like that.
Okay, you got a chance to watch Alabama A&M. What were your takeaways from that game?
That Alabama was caught off guard by the defensive package that Texas A&M put together in the first half, especially the blitz package. I don't also, on Alabama side on the defense, I don't think they covered the middle of the field well. I think they got burnt in some of those spaces. Some of the short yardage runs, I think linebackers were out of place. I think at times the secondary was too. Look at Alabama special teams, gives up a touchdown, right there in the second half. So I this Alabama team is still really, really good. Okay, let's make that point clear. But I think Texas A&M found a way in their passing game to expose Alabama in a couple different weaknesses that they have. And I think one of them has to do with the cornerback position. and the other one has to do with that linebacker spot right now that's being filled by Henry Toa. He missed a bunch of assignments on Saturday night. They're not that good covering the middle of the field, and A&M took advantage of that. And you got to give credit for Jimbo Fisher. You also have to give him credit for building up a quarterback in Calzada, that was an afterthought. Before the season started, everybody thought it was Haynes King, and then all of a sudden here comes Calzada playing really good football. I just think they punched him in the mouth, and Alabama, it took them a minute to respond. Yeah, they tied it up, but then look at the defense. For Texas A&M's able to drive down the field and set themselves up for a game-winning field goal. I just, I don't think they played well at all. I think Mississippi State, that could be an interesting game on Saturday with Alabama just coming out probably really ticked off at the way things went. And look, Alabama's got to be better on offense. They really do. They can't put themselves in those situations on third down, whether it's third down and 11 or whatnot, 3rd and 9, and they have to buy themselves out of it. So hat tip to Texas A&M, especially coming off a loss to Mississippi State and what they were able to do. So, Alabama's going to be fine. I think they're going to drop another game this year. I'll be honest with you, Chris, if Alabama played Georgia tomorrow, I think Georgia wins by 2 touchdowns because I think Georgia's defense is that good. And especially if they had JT Daniels. So Alabama's got a little bit of work to do, Chris.
Yeah. And look, Alabama injuries are a little bit of a reason right now. I know that they've got a safety hurt and some things like that, but I watched them on this defensive line and in the secondary. They're just not vintage Alabama. They don't measure up in all spots like their past teams have. And look, I never underestimate Nick Saban to get it right, but I watched them Saturday against an A&M offense that hadn't been good, and it just was a little surprising at times to see some of the blown assignments and just things like that.
Well, it was just Jimbo. It was a good job by Jimbo scheming up against Nick Saban's defense. And you're right. They, you can throw the injury thing out there, but Alabama's talented enough or they shouldn't be having the type of problems that they're having in the secondary and especially at the linebacker spot. So, I just think personally Alabama needs to fix certain spots of their defense that they're going to be winning a national championship this year or even playing for one. Because if they don't, another team's going to come out, they're going to be able to expose them in the passing game. Like this weekend, I'm sure you're going to see Mike Leach throw the ball around and have some success against Alabama. I don't think they'll have success running the football, but I think they'll have some success when it comes to passing. But, Alabama's going to win that football game, you would think. And so I think you'll start to see a little bit of adjustment, a little bit of improvement from Alabama. But this past weekend was not just some blip on the radar. It was Texas A&M out-scheming Nick Saban.
Is anybody beating Georgia this year? And by anybody, I mean anybody left on the regular season schedule, whether it's Alabama or someone else in the SEC title game, and whether it's Iowa, Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, Oklahoma, whoever would come in the college football playoff, Cincinnati. Do you see anybody anywhere in the country that they could potentially play that could give them matchup issues?
Not if they keep playing with this defense. I mean, look, this defense is volatile, ferocious. They get after the quarterback. They're bringing different stunt packages. The blitzing off the edge is causing problems. Look at the problems that it caused Bo Nix this past weekend. I don't see it right now. I mean, look, that game in Jacksonville, if Florida gets outside the pocket and makes plays down the field, you can make it interesting. But we've seen what Georgia can do against a quarterback, that is mobile. And that's what you're going to see this weekend. Kentucky going to Georgia, and I get Kentucky where they're ranked, and I get that they're 6-0 on the season, but I still don't trust this Kentucky offense. I just don't, because here's what's going to have to happen to beat Georgia. You're going to have to rush the ball. You're going to have to get over, 120, 150 yards rushing to have a chance. Because right now, I don't know if I trust Will Levis to get outside the pocket and make plays down the field with his arm. They're not having to throw the ball much, and that's something that, Kentucky has relied on. Cavassier Smoke running the football and Chris Rodriguez and that offensive line. I will say this. I think this is the best offensive line that Georgia is going to face so far this season, maybe potentially all season, until maybe you get to the SEC title game. But I'm not buying in, to what Kentucky could bring to the table. I think that Georgia right now, they're getting enough out of Stetson Bennett. They're definitely getting enough out of Kendall Milton and Zamira White running the football. So if they continue to play that, you have to wait a little bit before JT Daniels returns. Like if he doesn't return until maybe like the Florida game, something along those lines, I still think Georgia can go out and beat Kentucky with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. We've seen him make some terrific passes down the field. We've seen him scramble outside the pocket and get down the field. Like they're getting what they need out of Stetson. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was 20 attempts against Auburn, but he was efficient. And you look at what they need, that's what you need. You set up the play action. That's what Georgia's doing. They're catching teams off guard. So I don't think there are many teams in the country that can hang with Georgia for 3 quarters. I don't think there's a team in the country right now that could beat Georgia right now the way that their defense is playing.
The matchup that I think as much as any I'm circling on the regular season schedule in the SEC might be Florida, Georgia, and maybe 2 weeks from now I've changed my mind, okay? And I don't think Florida's going to win the game, but we also didn't see Texas A&M beating Alabama. And here's the profile of that game. A&M's a talented team. They had some obvious issues, but you saw how talented they were when they beat Alabama. I think you can make a similar case for Florida. I think with the Gators, I think they're good along the lines of scrimmage. Anytime you can maybe compete with another team there, that gives you a chance. That they've got speed all over the place. I think that's going to help. Georgia's certainly got that in spades. But I think the thing to me, the wild card for Florida, Trey, the quarterback play. Emory Jones has looked good at times, but he's still thrown a lot of picks. They've got Richardson waiting in the wings, if he's healthy, if Jones falters. And Dan Mullen, it's been pretty clear he wants to stick with Emory Jones, and I don't know if that's the right call or not. And I'm not always impressed with Jones. He does run the ball exceptionally well, and that helps. But to me, 2 weeks from now, let's say that quarterback situation solidified, there's your team that could potentially give them problems. Again, not picking it, but there are losses that happen that nobody sees coming, and that's the one that I think could potentially happen for them.
I don't disagree with you. If they roll out Anthony, look, Emory Jones is good running the football and making some plays outside the pocket, but he's also got 7 interceptions on the year. I think the 8 touchdown passes. I think Anthony Richardson would be a game changer for Florida. And it's not like we've seen a whole lot from Richardson, but what we have seen is a quarterback with tremendous speed and a quarterback with an awesome cannon of an arm that has that efficiency that you need with the wide receivers. So I look at that game and I could see it, Chris. I'm not going to lie. I could see Anthony Richardson scrambling outside the pocket for a 60-yard gain down the field. I could see them running different types of wide receiver sets to confuse Georgia or try to confuse Georgia. The biggest thing that you have to have if you're going to beat Georgia, in my opinion, is a quarterback that can make plays inside and outside the pocket. And when it collapses, which Georgia does a good job at that because they bring a lot of pressure on the outside, that's when you have a quarterback like Anthony Richardson that can get down the field. He attempted 7 passes this past weekend against Vanderbilt. Didn't use them much. But, man, I could see Dan Mullen pulling some wacky crap against Georgia, and you see a lot of Richardson in that game, and it completely flips the script on what we thought it would be.
Trey, we covered a lot of ground today. Anything in the SEC, and I know there's a lot, but anything else that's really catching your attention right now that we haven't hit today?
I'm interested to see if Arkansas can kind of break this 2-game losing streak and get things back rolling at home against Auburn. I think that they beat Auburn this weekend. I think KJ Jefferson had himself a really good game against Ole Miss. The defense just couldn't help themselves. I don't, Auburn. Look, Auburn's a pretty decent team, but I think that they have a lot of holes they have to fill. I don't know if Bo Nix can go up there and I know that he won down in Baton Rouge, but I just think, with everything going on, coming off the loss, the hits that he was taking last week against Georgia. I'm not saying he's hurt, but what I am saying is I'm interested to see what he can do with his legs against Arkansas, because you know that they're going to try to bring the pressure in that Barry Odom defense. So I want to see Arkansas bounce back. I want to see what they look like. From starting off the season, undefeated before heading into Georgia. Now you've dropped 2 straight. Can this team bounce back? That's kind of the other game that I'm looking at this weekend.
Oh, okay, you mentioned Auburn. So one last thing, and I know you have some connections to that program. I look at the schedule, okay? Let's say they don't get Arkansas this week. You've already seen that fan base has gotten antsy. They've fired a receivers coach. You know how fast, like when it does not go well there, that's one place that probably along with LSU that it tends to melt down pretty quickly. Auburn comes back from break. It's got Ole Miss at A&M, Mississippi State at South Carolina, and then Alabama at home. What happens there if they don't close well, which I think is entirely explainable by the schedule?
I mean, honestly, I see 2 wins out of that remaining schedule. And even Mississippi State's a toss-up to me.
Yeah.
I think they'll beat South Carolina, but Mississippi State's a toss-up. It's not like they're going to fire the coach or anything, but I will say this. He'll go into his second season, Brian Harsin. He won't be on the national hot seat or the warm seat, but I'll tell you this, it will be a pretty interesting offseason for Auburn football if they finish that season with, 4 out of 5 losses on their schedule. So that's why I think that game at Arkansas is so important for them to get back kind of on track a little bit. Get some offensive numbers up on the board. And if they can do that, okay, then maybe you have a different approach to the rest of the season, or at least 2 or 3 games on that remaining schedule. If not, Chris, they're going to be in trouble, and it's going to be a long off season on the Plains.
Trey, you've been an excellent guest. Tell people where they can follow your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Trey Wallace _ covering the SEC every single day at Outkick.com. A lot of great columns coming up later in the week, getting ready for a big weekend of SEC football. And Chris, it's always a pleasure. You're the best. You know it, and I had a great time, man.
Hey, we'll do it again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
He's Trey Wallace. I'm Chris Lee, host of The 14. Thank you for listening to this episode of our podcast. We'll be back with more next week.